Good afternoon all, Andrew here from Professional Advantage and welcome to our webinar on Microsoft Teams. Great to have you all connecting into our session today. We have been really a popular webinar, this one for us. We run regular webinars and we have hundreds of organisations joining us today to learn more about Microsoft Teams. So I suspect that we will have organisations that are all at their different parts of their journey. I know we have different roles attending today, from operations and HR, marketing, IT, etc. But I suspect you're all at a different point in your journey. Some of you are joining perhaps to find out a little bit more about Microsoft Teams for the first time. Others may well be down the journey of deploying Teams and are looking to perhaps get more out of it. Some of you might be looking to figure out better ways to govern and ensure compliance and security within your Teams environment. The nice thing is we actually have content suited for all of you today, and we look forward to presenting that through our session. Just a quick introduction to allow you to put a face to the voice. My name's Andrew McKenzie, and that's me on the right here in this image. And rather than a usual corporate photo that we might present, I thought this one had some relevance. I had the luck of and good fortune of being able to attend Microsoft Inspire over in Las Vegas a few weeks ago. And that's my colleague from Professional Advantage, Michael Birch, on my left there. And I guess the relevance of this photo is that Microsoft Inspire had 40,000 people attend. It's Microsoft's event where they set the communications out around their strategy for the year ahead, and there was a significant amount of content around Microsoft Teams. It was a real strong focus at Microsoft Inspire. Even both keynotes had client stories around that, and we got to see that journey. So there is absolutely no doubt you're in the right place. It's where Microsoft are expecting the future of our digital workplace to be. So in today's session, we're going to cover off a number of things. I'll touch on the rise of Microsoft Teams and the growth aspect of Teams in the workplace. My colleague who is presenting with us from our Melbourne office today, the beauty of modern technology. I'm in our Sydney office and Paul's in our Melbourne office, and Paul's going to be covering off our collaboration with Microsoft Teams, a little bit of a demo, also talking to you more about some of the new things coming up, as well as governance, security, compliance. He's going to switch back over to me, and I'll wrap up with a little bit around Microsoft Teams, using it in conference room settings, and perhaps how to get from where you are today to where you want to be, covering off migration planning at the end. So before we jump into that content, just a couple of points of note for you. You have a GoToWebinar panel, and for most of you that's probably on the right hand side of your screen. I do recommend that you enter any questions as we go in the webinar. We will save some time towards the end where we will answer questions. Any we don't get to, we'll respond to via email. So please enter your questions as you go. Just addressing the elephant in the room. Why are we using GoToWebinar? We are using GoToWebinar to ensure that we understand a little bit more detail around audience participation, etc. That as a webinar tool, Microsoft Teams doesn't quite give us that same detail just yet. So just addressing that up front with you, but everything else we use in general in the workplace, we do use Microsoft Teams. And we're also recording this session, so you will get a link to the session at the end in case you would like to share that with your colleagues or rewatch the session yourself. So jumping into the growth of Microsoft Teams, this really is quite a fascinating journey. It's a product that has been active for just 2 short years, so I think it was September 2017, and we now see 19 million users of Teams globally, right? 19 million users of Microsoft Teams. So if you are one of those users already, congratulations, you're part of the fastest ever growing business app in Microsoft's history, right? And I think that's quite an outstanding achievement. If you think Microsoft Teams is new to the environment, well, this will probably give you a different view of things. With 500,000 organisations around the world using it, most of the Fortune 100 companies. And I think what's also leading towards this growth and I guess, direction that teams can take and how we can engage with Microsoft Teams is 53 languages are already supported in Microsoft Teams. So just have a think about how that perhaps impacts things like recruitment, different skilled resources around overseas offices if you are, in fact, an organisation with international presence. It really is quite a game changer, I believe. And I captured this short little snippet from Microsoft Inspire around a demonstration from Unilever, and they were talking about their Dove factory in Vilnius. And if you look at the right-hand side, you will see in here that we have some text that's both in German and English. So they're bringing into play different resources from around the world. We can see the user on the right-hand side now is looking at that German text. They want to read it in English. They're a recipient of English. They hit the translate button, and you'll see that that text has changed there into that English text. So just a neat little video I thought I'd share at the start. Paul's going to go into a bit more detail in general. But that's just sort of supporting those foreign languages that we have access to. I think the growth and the pace of why it's Microsoft's fastest ever growing app is a little bit to do with the fact that we have this changing world both in the workplace and outside of the workplace. So these Forrester research statistics are saying 80% of employee time is spent collaborating. If I go back, 15, 20 years, perhaps organisations and individuals were a little bit more focused. We had our own folder, and that's where we put out content. We worked on things by ourselves. Now, even as little as 5 years ago, they're saying we have 2 times as many teams working together. And at least 56% of meetings have at least one remote attendee. Even this session, as I described, we already have speakers coming in from different locations. And in our organisation as well, generally on any meeting we have, people coming in from our interstate and overseas offices, be it Melbourne, Perth, Brisbane, or the US, UK, Philippines, etc. And so I'd really validate that is something we're seeing in the marketplace. The bottom stat there is probably a lag stat, I think, to some degree, and we're going to see a massive spike in that as we're more comfortable with video, with outside the workplace, people communicating on FaceTime and Skype and WhatsApp and other video available tools. So, and I will show you a little bit around Microsoft Teams rooms later that I think will explode that stat in the next 12 to 24 months. Let's just get a quick poll before I switch to Paul, who's going to jump into telling you a little bit more about the product itself. Let's just run a quick little poll around what the audience today is doing. So we want to get an idea to help Paul with his presentation on whether you're using things like Microsoft Teams. So if you can just respond to that poll, are you using Skype for Business and SharePoint as your main collaboration tool, or more traditional tools like email and file shares? Maybe you're using an alternative tool, something like a Slack or a Facebook Workplace, and maybe you're here to look at what Microsoft has to offer, or perhaps none of the above. But if you can just give that another 20 seconds just to pick your answers in that quick poll. We'll close that poll off, and let's take a look at the results there. Okay, wow. All right, so we've got some big numbers that are using Skype for Business and or SharePoint, so that transition to Teams for you is going to be fairly easy. Big numbers also already using Microsoft Teams and email and file shares, which is probably to be expected, given how many years we've worked in that space. So nice to see those strong numbers through. So that probably gives Paul some great numbers to think about as he comes onto the call with us. Paul's a guy who I love working with, one of our senior consultants here at Professional Advantage in that Office 365 and Microsoft Teams space, SharePoint and so on. Paul really bridges that gap between understanding the technology side of things, how businesses can really take the most advantage of the features in these tools, but also the user experience aspect and linking that through to security, compliance, and so on. Really love working with Paul, and Paul, welcome to the webinar stage today.
Thanks, Andrew. So we'll actually start off with a bit of an overview. Microsoft Teams is essentially a chat-based workspace that enables teams to be more productive by giving them a single and secure location that brings everything that team needs together. It delivers on 4 core areas to create this digital workplace to enable high performance. First, Microsoft Teams solves the communication needs of a diverse workforce through things like chat, meetings, and calling. Since the preview, Microsoft Teams has evolved to become a complete meetings experience. Microsoft team members can engage in private one-on-one chats. They can have group chats or they can expand out to the conversations that include the entire team. This modern conversations experience supports what's sort of called a persistent and threaded chat. Basically what that means is it makes sure that everyone is kept engaged regardless of where they're working. And team conversations are open by default to the team, that we can also lock down certain discussions if they're confidential. And people can include things like emoji and memes and other fun graphics in their messages. And you may not think that's really important, but it allows the team culture to shine through. So people are more likely and willing to use the new platform. Then we've got meetings. Microsoft Teams offers a complete meeting solution that supports screen sharing, video and audio conferencing, and this enables your organization to transform an ordinary meeting into a modern meeting in the following ways. So before the meeting, team members can share and review information, as well as the conversation history on a subject matter without having to leave Microsoft Teams. During the meeting, team members can share their desktop, meeting attachments, or even highlight a PowerPoint deck. And the meeting can take place in either audio conferencing or video, and all of it can be recorded so that when we get to after the meeting, team members can view these recordings, view any meeting details, including the conversation history, so they always have the complete context, so no one's left out of the lurch. And users can also have a dedicated phone number and advanced calling features. So this does require additional licensing, but it can support things like phone transfers, delegations, and even support for emergency calls. And finally, all of this is available through the mobile, desktop, and browser, so that it doesn't matter where you're working from. When it comes to collaboration, there's deep Office integration that enables today's workforce to use the Office apps they're already familiar with. So Word, Excel, PowerPoint, OneNote, and SharePoint. In the past, when we wanted somebody's feedback, you may have sent the file via an email, they store it locally, they add their comments, they email it back, and it's a vicious cycle that repeats. So you end up with files, being version 2, version 3, version 4. Worst case scenario, you add a little underscore final to that. And the additional thing you're always doing is jumping between email and other apps to get work done. So Teams bring all these applications into one spot so that you don't lose that context. And that includes things like being able to co-author straight from within Microsoft Teams. And the reality is, many organizations use services other than those provided within Office 365, which may typically result in people having to jump between applications and disparate experiences. Microsoft's built Microsoft Teams to not only be the hub for Office 365 services, but for all the services and tools your teams use on a day-to-day basis. And the reality is every group is unique. So Teams makes it easy for you to tailor the workspace to include apps and services which are relevant to that team or your organization as a whole. And you can customize Teams with tabs and connectors and bots, which we'll talk about a little bit later on, so that you can include the apps that you use. So apps like Asana, Trello, or even the Adobe Creative Cloud can be included in Teams. And there's actually integrations with over 150 partners. And for the development community, we have an extensible platform so that when you don't have an integration point, or an application that exists, you can actually build your own to integrate with existing applications like your line of business app so that you're still using Microsoft Teams as that hub. And finally, you can work with confidence because Teams comes with the same enterprise-grade security, compliance, and manageability that you come to expect from Office 365 and really Microsoft in general. What we'll do now is we'll take a little look at what Teams actually looks like. So here we've got Microsoft Teams. So currently logged in as Megan because that's my test account. And I'll run through the main elements of what we're seeing on the screen here. So I'll just zoom in a little bit on the right here. So right now, there's really three areas. We've got the first area here, which is navigation. Then we've got sort of what's called the secondary navigation, and third element is the main content area on the far right. And right now, the reason I'm seeing Teams and Conversations is because I've actually clicked the Teams menu item. So right now I'm focusing on the core of the Teams application so that I can see the actual Teams. So right now I'm in the general channel of the retail team. So this is where you can start seeing that we've got teams that associate to departments like sales and marketing as well as retail, but we also have the Mark 8 project team down the bottom here. And so the reality is that we want to start using Microsoft Teams to group up not only departmental content, but project-based content so that people can have conversations related to that. And as we go further down, and what I'll jump to is, say, the research and development channel of the project team. So the concept of a channel is pretty easy. It's basically an area within a project or a department that you need to have distinct conversations about or store unique files. So here we can see in the research and development area, sort of just zoom in a little bit, where we see that conversation feed that Andrew showed us with that great translation feature. And so by default, we have conversations and files. And all these conversations, the really nice part is that we actually have them collapse. So here we can see an older conversation has got 5 replies, but because it's an older conversation, Teams automatically collapses it. So it's still there. I still get notified that it's new, but I don't have it taking up real estate. So think about in the past, you would traditionally have an email trail, which could be pages and pages worth of information. And a lot of that's just email signatures and information you don't really need. So that's one of the ways that we get a really clean interface. But where the integration comes into place is with these tabs. So when I click on the Power BI tab, we're basically surfacing information from other applications. So whether it's within Office 365, so right now, we're actually loading up a live Power BI dashboard and all our security still applies. So if I didn't have access to this Power BI dashboard, the tab would tell me so. And the nice part is that it's interactive. So you can sort of see data starting to come in. So I can work through all these tabs and view all the data, but without losing context of the project team that I was working on. And last tab I'll show you is the project plan. So right now we're planning out our project. We're having conversations, we're storing files, but then we can tap into Planner, another piece of functionality that brings task management into the same stack. So that I talked about tools like Asana or Trello, but that's only if you use those. If you need something and currently you're doing it in ad hoc fashion, you can use Planner. And this is where we can assign tasks, we can see the due date, we can reassign all in one spot. So the really great thing about Teams is that it's all brought together. And when we want to start having those meeting type experiences, when we click on things like meetings, this is where I actually get a snapshot into my last meeting. So here you can see I've got meetings showing up and we have this same experience through Outlook so that we can jump between meetings, we can make calls to our colleagues, and if we integrate with a phone system, we can actually use our desk phones, and we can also have chats with people. And so regardless of the device I'm on, it will all show up in one spot. And if I've been away for a while, I can take a quick look at the activity feed. So I can essentially jump back and catch up with things even when I've been away from Teams for a while. So hopefully you get a bit of an idea of what Teams can do, and we've only really touched the surface. So I'll just jump back to our slides now and talk a little bit about what's coming. So some of the cool features that are coming, the first one, so we spoke about the inline message translation. Andrew showed us a really cool video, but Update just last month saw the private preview release of what's called live captioning, so that team meetings will be more inclusive for attendees who are deaf, hard of hearing, or connecting from noisy environments. So this is a really cool feature that will be coming out later this year. And then we've got another feature that's coming out soon called intelligent capture. So using content cameras, which Andrew will touch on when he talks about Teams rooms. Remote attendees can clearly see whiteboards in real-time brainstorming sessions without getting the content blocked as people move in front of the camera. So you can sort of see that, and there's many times when you're in the same room that this happens. So it's really nice to see. And the next feature, blurred backgrounds. If you've used Teams, you may have heard about it. It may not sound too impressive, but think about the last time you decided not to turn on your video because of distractions behind you. So customized backgrounds take the background blur to the next level to encourage further use of video in meetings. So remote workers benefit in presenting a professional workplace with, say, the logo of your organization behind them in their home office, even if you've got a picture of dogs playing poker, which I love, but not everyone does. So all those features are great, but we actually need to make sure that we can actually secure it all and we can still be compliant. So the first point, local data residency. And I've highlighted newer tenants because if you do have an older tenant, you may not have been brought across to Australian data centers. So it's just a side note that may be worth checking into. Microsoft is working to bring them across. But then we've got tools such as multi-factor authentication, as well as secure guest access. And when it comes to compliance, Microsoft is a leader when it comes to global standards. And if a standard isn't there, we can use the built-in information protection tools to come up with policies that make sure that we're compliant. So we've always got the ability to be compliant with the tools. And when it comes to identity management, we've got a couple of models. So cloud identity is all about having an account that only lives in the cloud. So they only access Office 365 and things like Teams. Synchronized and federated identities are a little bit different because they rely on on-premises infrastructure. So synchronized identity, for those that are familiar, is where your password gets synced into the cloud. Federated identity is when you still have on-prem infrastructure like ADFS, Active Directory Federation Services, to be able to connect. And all of these have multi-factor authentication options, going from the Office 365 tools all the way to physical or virtual smart cards if you're in a federated scenario. And then we've got auditing. So in the image on the right, you can see that we can audit things like when teams are created, when users are added to a team or removed, when tabs are added. And the important thing is Microsoft Teams is just one of the apps that support auditing in the broader stack so that you can secure your documents, make sure Power BI, all the activity there is monitored, Teams, as well as the other applications. And we can also export this data if we want to keep the audit logs for a longer period of time. Next, we have content search. So content search essentially lets you perform a search over in-place items such as documents in SharePoint or OneDrive, emails within Exchange and Outlook, as well as the instant messaging conversations. So whether that's a private chat or a group conversation. So we can run searches using keywords across all the data. And when it comes to protecting your data, the first way we can do that is using data loss prevention. So this can prevent things like private chats or messages, as well as documents from being shared incorrectly, whether maliciously or accidentally. We can do things like just notify the user before they send. We can silently notify just the administrators, or we can completely block this. And we can configure policies that are driven by the type of information, the volume, the location of where it's stored, as well as the intended recipients. So we have all that control now. And then when it comes to ensuring that we comply with retention requirements, we can set up policies that ensure that we're preserving our data for a specific time period. We can also help with the long-term sort of governance of our platform by preserving and then deleting when content becomes old, or we can just set up policies that delete content after a specific time. And so all this information, including the features that we saw, we really need to think about governance. So governance sometimes is, both a scary word as well as a very vague term. But the reality is the starting point is as simple as how and when a new team's created in context to Microsoft Teams, who will own the content, and what will their responsibilities be? Things like how do I securely share documents, as well as thinking about what average users need to do. So that's probably one of the key things. So one example around a sort of starting point for governance is where do conversations go? So an easy way if you're using a couple of Microsoft products is to break it down into the use case. So when we're talking to people on our core projects, we've got the inner loop. And so that's where we can use Teams as well as private chats to have communication. And we've got the outer loop when you want to basically broadcast information to the broader organization. So this could be as simply as sales, notifying the broader business about some deals that they've closed or need help with. So that's where a tool like Yammer comes into play. And finally, email is ubiquitous, right? So email, we're not trying to eliminate it. We're just trying to make the best use of it. So when we're doing private and more formal comms, as well as targeted communications, that's where Outlook comes into play. And all three of these communication tools can leverage SharePoint for their file and the content. So this is a really easy way to try to simplify the question about governance when it comes to conversations, so people don't get confused about where to post. And one sort of simple way that we try to expand that out to teams is think about teams as a starting point for a user's own team, department, or project. So it's the area that team-wide communication happens instead of sending emails to the whole team. This is where document collaboration happens for that project or team data, as well as linking to third-party applications like task management or reporting. So finance would obviously use different tools, say, when it comes to reporting versus the sales and external marketing teams. Then we've got SharePoint. So how do we govern SharePoint? So we can see SharePoint being the platform or the starting point for any task that's related to the organization as a whole or another department. So this is where we can do things like link to organization-wide systems like payroll. This is also where we can store documents that relate to the whole organization, such as policies and procedures, and where we have organization-wide communication and alerts where everyone needs to be aware. And a really important one that people tend to forget about is OneDrive. So this one's pretty straightforward. OneDrive is where an individual stores their content. So the content is owned by them. So the traditional H drive or home drive, that's where OneDrive Online comes into play. And then a tool that sort of brings it together is OneDrive for Business, the sync tool. And this is where whether the files live in SharePoint directly or in Teams or in OneDrive, you can make sure that they're accessible on your computer without having to worry about opening up the browser. So when we try to wrap all these things together, a quick recap is that we can use Teams for our files, we can use OneDrive for my files, the OneDrive sync for files on the go, and finally SharePoint can be a landing page with links, or if you want to call it, an intranet. So it's important to flag that Teams is just one part of a bigger picture. So Teams is built on top of Office 365 groups, and we've got things like Microsoft Graph, which is using machine learning to link it all together, and we have security and compliance across all of it. So when it comes to governance, it's important to touch on everything, but it's also important that you don't have to do it all in one hit. So you start with a team strategy and then expand from there. And now I'll hand over to Andrew, who'll talk a little bit about how we can expand Teams to use physical spaces and how you can actually start planning your transition to Teams.
Thanks, Paul. That is great. Hopefully you guys got a little excited there about some of the cool new features coming along. I know that I love the idea that we can have those custom backgrounds and perhaps have a company logo behind us when we're presenting. Really brings into play, workers from all locations and creating a bit of a sophistication around those perhaps those external presentations, and lots of great stuff around governance. Of course, when I mentioned to Paul he had about 20 to 25 minutes to cover Teams, he did groan and say, wow, thanks for a challenge. So there is much more that certainly Paul and myself would both like to touch on, and that's really just a starting point for the conversation, and happy to share more with you. Just a little bit around Microsoft Teams Rooms. I'm just going to be fairly brief on this, but when we think about the conversation around where we're presenting from, a lot of a lot of workers might be coming from those personal devices, right? Maybe their laptop or their phone. They might be dialing in on a desk phone or their mobile or whatever it might be. So we have those different personal spaces that we can present from. On top of that, though, we also need to think about our meeting rooms. right? And how do we create that sophistication so we don't really want to bring everyone coming in with their laptops and their chargers and their phones where multiple people forget to put their audio onto mute and then we get all that echo, etc. We're looking for a more professional experience, and that's really where Microsoft Teams Rooms comes into play. And we might have access to a scenario that looks a little bit more like this, where we have the screens up the front of the room, we've got the speakers and the webcams that are tracking those speakers, and something like a touch device, perhaps replacing your old school conference phone on the table. And these are really neat devices. This one you're looking at here is from a company called Logitech, called their tap device, where we come in, the upcoming meetings are all visible. We walk in and simply press the join button there as that user's about to demonstrate. And it's all fully integrated with Teams and allows us to present and manage users, etc., from that device. And if we've got it integrated with our phone system, we've got the dial pad where we can use it like a traditional phone as well. So there's lots of different vendors. I mentioned Logitech there, but whether it's Crestron or HP, Logitech, Polycom, others, there's lots of hardware vendors for those Microsoft Teams rooms, and it really makes quite a difference. The other scenario to think about is your mobile worker, who also might come in from a mobile device, and what's really nice is you can actually share and present from your mobile as well. So it goes both ways. We can be presenting out to people receiving on their mobiles, or we can present from a mobile to people sitting in a meeting room as well. But I really wanted to touch on and just change the focus of the conversation quickly and touch on the idea of what is Teams. Is it really just a space where we are collaborating on content and we are looking at reports or tasks or videos or files or conversations or holding meetings? Or should we be thinking about this a little bit more as a focused business application? So I mentioned a couple of keynote sessions at Microsoft Inspire a few weeks ago. One of them was presented by a gentleman called Dr. Dave Kellerman of the University of New South Wales. Great presentation, and it really showed his use and understanding of Microsoft Teams as a business application. He's part of the engineering department at the University of New South Wales, 500 students. How does he connect all those students and bring them together to learn and develop as a community of learners within the university? He used to publish content on YouTube that students would view those lecture sessions. He's since moved those lecture sessions into Microsoft Stream, which is in Office 365, and he's made that visible within Microsoft Teams. He's created channels for every lecture session. He's deployed QR codes onto the lecture content, and he's established a question bot that actually looks for relevant content, because how does one lecturer respond to 500 student questions effectively and quickly when we're now in this collaboration environment? It changes the way that communication occurs. So he has this connected experience in Microsoft Teams, one place where students go, and question bots are providing answers for him, linking students back to the lecture papers with the QR codes. The relevant lecture sessions are sitting in Microsoft Stream, answering the questions directly and effectively creating resources and tailored text, if you like, for students to work with. So that was a great example of a focused business application. How you may want to think about it might come in different scenarios here. So we could have something like a horizontal plane, our roles in our organisations. So that might be things like, shift management for frontline workers, maybe marketing hubs and event management, where we're using those aspects like Planner to track maybe we've got surveys that we're conducting, or onboarding life cycles for HR. It was a project we recently did with a customer in Victoria, using Power Apps to manage that onboarding application to recruit, and perhaps we're using the conversations to track employee feedback on the interview candidates and more. So it's really up to you to think about how we use these different scenarios as a business application that's available to us in Teams. Similarly, that could be more an industry type focus. Perhaps we're in medicine and we're looking at the telemedicine opportunity that we can have with those online meetings and patient care coordination. We could be looking at field service remote assistance for power and utilities organisations, or organisations like ourselves, a bit more professional services. Think of proposal management and project management and client access in to keeping a track of tasks and responding to documentation and those sorts of things. So really, I want to get you to think a little bit more than this is just a technology tool, and how does this align to our business process and how we work as an organisation. And that's where an organisation like Professional Advantage can be of great assistance to you out there. Okay, migration planning. We've got 5 minutes left, so I'll be quick through this and jump into a couple of questions. We might go a couple of minutes over, but we do have a recording you can watch if anyone misses anything here. But on the migration planning side, if you're a Skype customer today and you're using Skype for Business, Microsoft Teams is now fully capable with Skype for Business as a replacement tool. So we've already made the switch. We've turned off access to Skype for Business within our organisation. Don't fret, if you do get a Skype for Business originated invitation to a meeting, you are still able to attend those meetings. I would suggest that if you are a Skype for Business user, you're going to get a lot more out of Microsoft Teams because of that additional collaboration capability. Start using it in pilot groups and getting used to that, and building your migration plan. Run them side by side, and then make a plan where you're going to call that switch and perform that switch over. If you're using it for a voice system, make sure you speak to your voice provider if you're using full voice integration in Skype for Business. If you are, say, new to something like a tool like this, maybe new to Office 365 platform in general, or new to Microsoft Teams, just a little highlight around maybe a thought process around where you are today to where you need to get to. It's really important to gather your team together of stakeholders, people who are on the ground working. This is where your journey begins and your change management journey begins. So any team that you want together, you want to get representatives from different levels of the business as you plan this out. So this is really your envisioning phase that's going to take all users on that journey of where you're going. And this is where, again, an organisation like ourselves can help guide you through that with envisioning workshops and governance workshops, and helping you prioritise those business scenarios. Like I said, is it a business app or is it just a collaboration tool? Make sure you empower your IT to control and manage the process, and there's certainly the security and the mobile deployments and the network to consider there. We're happy to assist and discuss modern hybrid approaches to all those things to make it work best. And look, there's certainly nothing wrong with those pilots, but the journey, once you go live, you're probably going to only release a certain level of features to users, so it's not overwhelming. You don't have to do it all at once. And certainly that's where we're going to then measure the activity and perform that continuous adoption and success management, and release more features as you grow. That journey, that discussion could go on for hours. That's a quick snapshot. We're more than happy to talk more through that with you. We're going to jump into some questions in a moment, but just as an offer to help you move through from where you want to be to successfully get to where you want to go, in your survey as you disconnect today, you will get a opportunity to sign up for either an envisioning workshop, a governance planning workshop, or a fully fledged Office 365 migration plan, where we can come out, spend a little bit of time with you, explaining the process around those things, helping you get started on the front foot without having to go to a fully fledged cost exercise, and give you a better understanding of the next steps as an offer from joining our webinar today. So that, as I say, really helps you get from where you are today to ensure you're going to have a successful outcome in that transition. Maybe you're already in Teams, and it's about taking advantage of some of those governance plans as well, and maybe re-architecting what you have today to an extent. So given we're pretty much on time, I'm just going to reach out to my colleague Fung here. I think we've had some questions come through during the session, Fung.
Yeah, we've had quite a few.
Excellent. We might not have time to get through all of them, but let's just grab a couple here and work our way through those.
Sure. So we do have a question. Can you have team members that don't have Office 365? So someone's talking about things like external collaboration.
Yeah, great. That's a really good question. Yes, most definitely. So, and that can come in different ways. It can come, do I want to present to an external party? The answer is simply yes. I do that multiple times during the week using Teams meetings. The other part of that question perhaps is, can I have people come into a team that are not a Teams user? And again, the answer is yes to that. I don't know if you want to expand on that in any way, Paul.
No, you covered it really well.
Okay, great. And obviously you have certain securities around what those external people can do, etc. too. So, but the answer is most definitely yes.
So I am noticing a theme, and there are a couple questions around the security and permission. So another question is, can I create multiple channels under a single team, or do I have to have separate permission levels access for each channel?
Okay. So, Paul, you might want to answer this one because I know the security at the channel level within Teams has a couple of gotchas, I believe. But as a consultant, I'm going to lean on you to answer that one better.
Sure. So yeah, basically we've got a couple of options when it comes to security. As of right now, the security is down to a team level. So, and a team can have multiple channels. Something that is actually being built, and it's in, I believe it's private preview, is the concept of a private channel. So that, for example, the finance team can have a team, and you can have multiple channels within them, and one of them could be for the CFO as well as her or his EA, and that could be a private channel where it's locked down further. But as of right now, when it comes to conversations, it's down to the team level. The files, however, can be locked down to all the way down to an individual file folder level, because in the back end, we basically have one SharePoint site for a team. And then we basically have all the granularity of permissions when it comes to files. Yeah, so we have that option, and what's coming is the private channel. All the chats, however, are locked down. And one of the nice things with group chats is, which are essentially ad hoc chats like you would have in a WhatsApp. When you add, say, a fourth member to a group chat of 3 people, you actually have the option of giving that new member all the history, just say 2 days worth of history, or no history at all, so that you've got that control when you're using group chats.
Thanks, Paul. That was a great answer. I think we have time for one more question, and this is, which Office 365 plan includes Microsoft Teams?
So that one is a good question there. I believe all the E-plans include Microsoft Teams. You need to be mindful, I think, though, that the E1 plan does not include the desktop or the mobile versions, and would probably only give you access to the browser-based version. So if we didn't make that clear, you have a desktop app in Teams, you have a mobile app for Teams, and you can access through the browser as well. But any of your E1, E3s, E5s sort of things will give you access to Microsoft Teams. The E1 version is unlikely to give you the desktop and mobile app, as I understand it.
So I'll just add something there that we also have, which could be important for a lot of organizations, the small business plans. So those plans include it. So the business essentials as well as business premium. And one really nice thing, which a feature we weren't able to sort of highlight, but Andrew mentioned first line workers, we can use the Office 365 F1 plan, which is for first line workers.
Excellent. Look, I can see there's a bunch of questions there that also have come through that are relevant very to specific industries and scenarios there. We might take those ones offline and come back to you on email on those, given that we've got a few minutes over here. But we do want to thank everyone for the participation today, the questions, answering the polls, and we really do hope you got a lot out of the brief session we've had today on Microsoft Teams. We will run other sessions in the future, so please fill out your surveys and provide us some feedback, and that will help guide the content that we put forward in future sessions like this. So thanks again for everyone attending. We look forward to speaking with you in the future if you think we can be of assistance, and have a terrific afternoon.